Pastor Cheryl here, and I am so excited to be sharing with you our final thread for the Summit Up Devo of Risky Faith. We've been spending a lot of time in Hebrews 11 these past few weeks, and we have found that this is a chapter that shows us that men and women have lived into their faith. You know, in the Christian circle, this chapter, Hebrews 11, is often referred to as the Hall of Faith. And the first verse of this chapter reads this way: faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things that we cannot see. And today I want to take us to verse 32. It's just a person that's briefly mentioned, but I want to focus in on this gentleman named Barak. Now we're going to find the actual story of Barak in Judges, the 4th chapter. And this time frame in the nation of Israel is quite unprecedented because the Israelites are finding themselves oppressed again by another king, the Canaanite king Jabin. And their oppression wasn't unprecedented, but what was unprecedented is that there was a judge during this season. And this was the judge Deborah. She was the 4th judge of Israel, and she was the only female judge of Israel. Now, the Israelites had come to a place where they felt like they just could not take the oppression any longer. And they began to cry out to God and ask for a release, ask for help. And God spoke to Deborah. Now, what happens is Deborah hears from God. He downloads a strategy to her, and she calls on Barak. She talks to Barak. She downloads to Barak what God has said to her as far as how they could take the Canaanite army. And she says, you know, you need to get your troops ready and go into battle. And Barak says, okay, I'll go, but I'll only go if you go with me. That was quite an unusual request because women weren't known to be on the battlefield. But Deborah says, okay, I'll go with you, but you need to know this, Barak. If I go with you, your name will not be what is known as the victor. This victory will go to a woman. I like this idea that Barak understands the need is bigger than his reputation. And so he puts his ego on the shelf and he says, let's do this. He had such faith and such confidence in Deborah's ability to hear from God that he was willing to set his ego aside and just get the job done. I think that Barak shows risky faith. And then there's another side of this story also that I think shows risky faith, because scripture tells us that during this battle that the Lord threw the Canaanite army into great panic. And the commander of the army, Sisera, who was actually the one that was so oppressive to the Israelites, he escaped. He ran to a tent of a woman named Jael. Now, in the meantime, the Israelites chased this entire army of the Canaanites, and they overtook the chariots, and the enemy was completely defeated. They killed every one of them. But let's get back to Jael. You see, she knew how oppressive Syria was to the Israelites. And in those days, the job of pitching a tent fell to the women. And Jael was no stranger on how to drive a tent peg. And you've probably heard this story about the tent peg. You see, after Syria fell asleep in her tent, she took a tent peg and she drove it right through his temple and into the ground, and he died there. Scripture says that from that day on, Israel became stronger until they finally destroyed King Jabin. Now, in this story today, we have 3 people that I believe have lived into risky faith. You have Deborah, who was willing to go into the battle. That was risky. You have Barak, who was willing to lead the battle but wasn't concerned about who got the credit. That was risky. And you have Jael, who took out the commander of the Canaanite army. That, my friends, is a powerful story of risky faith. And I think that story leaves us with 3 questions that we could answer in our own lives. Is there an area where God is asking you? I know there's an area he's asking me to step into risky faith. Question number 2 is there an enemy that needs defeated in your life? And question number 3 is there someone that you need to bring into the battle with you? Well, my friends, I hope this devotional has built your faith. And I hope that after this month spent in Hebrews, that you have become more confident in our God's goodness and his character. I want you to know that he is for us, he is not against us. And there are great things that can be done if we partner with him. And I believe great days are ahead for each and every one of us. Will you join me in taking the ground together? I pray you will, and I'll see you next time.